Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Prospero.Ai stock market live stream. It's good to see Wolf already in the chat, chatting it up. Wolf, you welcomed me to the stream today, huh? Oh, wait, why am I hearing myself? Uh, Here we go. Uh, Take it away, guys. Yeah, good to see you, Wolf. As always, George is going to be joining me in a few moments. I'm going to take you guys through some of the topics we're going to be discussing today. It looks like Jerome Powell pumped the markets up after maybe a few disappointing earnings. We'll talk about those to lead off our stream today. You know, we had companies like CVS, Starbucks dropping a lot, maybe more than you'd expect. A little bit of a older, more stable value company to move. And then we also have SMCI and AMD dropping a bit on earnings. So we're going to be discussing all of those companies and more. Obviously, Amazon, but yeah, a lot to discuss. The market was looking like it was in a bit of panic mode, fear mode this morning, but things look like to be changing. I guess Jerome Powell probably, I know he's speaking right now. He's probably saying what the market wants to hear. And we see QQQ net option sentiment popping up to 35 after I saw it, I think in the low 20s this morning. So looks like the market's in a better spot. As always, if you're a longtime viewer, let me know in the chat right now that you're in here. I love to see the names. I already saw Wolf, obviously, and like the stream. Without further ado, let me announce some of the topics that we're going to be going through. So there was an IPO today that I saw being talked about a lot. It was Viking Cruises. Have you ever been on a Viking cruise? Anyone in here? I saw their average guest ticket or pass to be on a cruise, or average spend for a cruise, was over $7,000. So it's a bit of a luxury cruise experience. Hey, Joseph, good to see you in the chat. But Viking went public at a $10.4 billion valuation. So we'll be taking a look at that IPO. I know cruise and airlines are typically not the favorite investment of investors in the stock market. So it was surprising to me to see Viking have such a good reaction on their IPO day. They were up 10% last time I looked. So I'll spin that to George and see what he thinks of Viking Cruises. And another story we're going to cover, obviously, Amazon had earnings, and they're one of the big investors in an AI company called Anthropic, which is a major competitor to OpenAI, Google Gemini. They just launched an app, and they have a business tier for their Claude large language model. So we'll discuss that and what that means for Amazon, possibly some of the other AI companies. I see George has joined us. Let me bring him up to the front as I continue taking us through the topics we're going to discuss. Yeah, Wolf, no spiky dude in here yet, but hopefully he'll be tuning in today. We had
I
some,
think we call him Saul now.
yeah, Wolf commented spiky dude. I don't know. My brain is always in a pretzel with that now. But we have a update on the Apple car story, codenamed Titan. Obviously, it's been scrapped, but numbers came out. They had invested over $10 billion in a project that never came to fruition. Kind of crazy, the scale of that. And I thought it was also interesting that they were thinking about possibly acquiring Tesla instead of developing their own car at one point. So we'll get into that. And obviously, spinning right into Tesla, there was some news about their supercharging network and doing a lot of cuts, almost cuts across the board to that whole segment. And I actually have a quote, a semi quote from an Xpeng boss that I haven't shared with George yet, and I'll wait till we get into that topic. I think it's going to be interesting. We'll see what you think of it, George. And then obviously, we didn't do the model portfolio update on Monday, but stick around, everyone, because we're going to be doing it today. After we get to these final two stories, there was a cyber attack on United Healthcare earlier this year. We have numbers from it and what it meant for some of their clients and their business. So we're going to be taking you through that. And then last but not least, we are going to be wrapping it up with a crypto story. The DOJ is going after Bitcoin Jesus. We'll tell you what that means and if we could expect more stories like that to come out in the future in the crypto industry. But to start off today, George, we had a lot of earnings going on. The market seemed to be in a bit of a tumultuous place this morning, but I think Jerome Powell is kind of quelling the market's fears. think he's live still right now. He maybe just ended, but looking better than this morning for sure. Um, so what do you make of today's action?
Yeah, for once, Powell saying things that are making the market happier. Well, I mean, I would say for a while that's what we were seeing. Um, and then we kind of had something in the reverse. But it's very interesting. Like we're seeing some, you know, I guess kind of an escalation of that fear, and maybe it explains why Powell's taking the direction he did. SPY net option sentiment at midday was actually at 14. It's now back up to 38. QQQ is actually more on receding. But yeah, I would say that there's starting to be a lot of, and Powell probably sees it, nervousness in the market, and we're going to talk more about like some of the ways that we're seeing this, and I think what we always say about Powell is as long as he has the room, he was going to not cut, not make cuts as long as the market was doing well. But he sees the same things we are, which is like I think a nervous market, a market that's starting to show weakness. So not only I think was he more reassuring today, that he's kind of seeing the same things that everybody else is, um, but I think that that was kind of some much needed reassurance by the market. So I think I think that um, it's definitely, especially with QQQ net option sentiment going down a little bit, it's definitely like some still concern from our side. But I would say this could have this if the market didn't like what Powell said, could have turned it into a real bear direction. But I think now we're looking like it's going to be a bullish day. I'm not sure if it's going to continue into tomorrow yet, or if it's just kind of some exuberance more so around him. Seeming like he's more serious about rate cuts than he has been in the past. But we'll see.
So hitting on the market nervousness, we got some bad earning reports after they had been mostly good. Obviously, Meta reacted negatively, but their earnings was still pretty good overall. So CVS, Starbucks both down very big. SMCI, AMD down big. Amazon earnings were pretty good. They are up now, I believe, today. But what surprised me was the volatility out of more stable and value companies in Starbucks and CVS, and kind of concerns me. Like, I feel like companies like that shouldn't move that big, and that's kind of an underlying issue. So, am I right to feel that nervousness about those kind of moves in those stocks?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that we're kind of seeing more extreme moves because of the general market nervousness. But I think what you're also seeing with those stocks is, obviously, it's kind of an accentuation around the general nervousness where, certain things are going to be attacked. And I think we talk about like beyond, we talked about the union thing for Starbucks, but beyond that, I think we're starting to see some signs of decline in the business. And if you're looking at, CVS, obviously Rite Aid, is a big, company that has had a lot of trouble recently, and it is a very similar business. CVS is, larger and I would say in better position. But I think, what we're definitely seeing in both of those is kind of the macro picture that we paint all the time too, which is like I think some people are going to be are kind of more and more scared of this consumer spending thing being a real thing, or perhaps starting to see it impact some companies' bottom lines, and those are obviously in that area. So I think we'll agree on your larger point that the market is more nervous overall, and it's going to take it out more on companies. I think there's also very tangible reasons why those companies were targeted like that. They're in retail. There's other stories around them that are concerning, especially with Starbucks. And in the case of CVS, you're talking about, the closest comp already facing some pretty severe troubles. So I think for those reasons, it makes a lot of sense that they were targeted. But I do think, in terms of the nervousness, we're seeing a very tight market. And we saw that with Meta, and we're talking about that a lot, obviously, where even though they posted great earnings, Zuckerberg kind of said one thing, and what's about like, pretty much like like a smaller line item for them, just an increase in 2 billion. Well, it's not a small line items, but it's, the 2 billion represented out of 33 to 37 billion was what the total estimate was for that capex spend before they added that to it. So that's why it's kind of like, well, it's a big number. It is kind of a smaller number to kind of tank the whole stock price, I would say. But we are seeing, I think, this general nervousness, and then I would say kind of more targeted nervousness around, businesses that might have problems beyond that. So it does make sense kind of why we saw that, both on a macro level and as it relates specifically to the businesses and the sectors of kind of consumer spending. But yeah, I think until we kind of solve some of these, have explanations for some of these larger macro issues, I do think we're going to see a tight market, at least until after the election.
So it's interesting with all of that, fear and uncertainty going on, especially within the economy. We had an IPO today of Viking Cruise, and it actually went really well. The stock's up 10% last I saw. It went public at a $10.4 billion valuation. And from what I've learned so far, cruise lines and airlines are not investors' favorite investment in the stock market, seemingly. But this went well today, and even with all the underlying concerns you're talking about, kind of surprised me. I thought maybe they priced this IPO low on purpose to try and make it be good. You think I'm on the right line of thinking there, or what's your take on that IPO today?
Well, I think historically, and again recently, this wasn't true in the bear market. IPOs do well. So I think you do tend to get attention around those, but I think one of the reasons that IPOs tend to do well is, part of this kind of circular logic that IPOs go up, so they do well. So, it was kind of something that needed to be, I would say, kind of recorrected coming out of the bear market. But I would also say that, like, yes, I imagine the way kind of like cruises have taken a bit of a hit in terms of, like, I would say post-pandemic, people view them a little differently. I would say that I'm sure the bankers wanted to price it especially attractively, because the last thing that you want is to have a stock start to go down, the shorters start to come in and say, oh, we could short this cruise stock IPO that didn't do very well. So I'm sure they did it very defensively. But, it's fair to say, like, why doesn't everyone do IPOs defensively? And, that's a good question. I would say that, some some of the thinking involved in that is they'd say, oh, if the average IPO goes up 20%, kind of regardless, we can kind of set an aggressive price, and then we might still get that 20% just because there's, anticipation of the stock and excitement around owning shares. So there's a lot of like logic and psychology to it. But I would think especially like something like cruises that have had trouble, like, they're not going to take the risk of maybe overpricing it and running into that, that lack of excitement, especially when IPOs have started to do better. It kind of makes you stick out like a sore thumb if your IPO is actually down. And, there are a lot of people that, might have been looking to short a disappointing IPO and cruise line. And I'm sure it was kind of priced appropriately compared to that.
Yeah, so we'll keep our eyes on Viking Cruise. I believe the ticker is VIK, if I didn't say that earlier. But to spin it into a new story, we have Anthropic, which we've talked about before. Amazon is a big investor in that company. It's an AI company. One of their touted products is Cloud. It's a large language model, big competitor to OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini. They announced that they're launching their first app ever. It's going to be on iOS only, which I found interesting for now. But they're working to get it on Google soon. I wonder if that happens to, like, with that, Google Gemini is a big competitor and Apple doesn't really have one. So I don't know what the thinking is behind that. But they're also launching a business tier for their service, $30 per month per user. And I thought this stat was crazy, which was shared in the article that I was reading about it. The generative AI explosion in 2023 uh, totaled over 700 deals worth $29.1 billion. So it's just insane the money that's being invested in this industry. And obviously, Meta wasn't rewarded for it last week, but it looks like it will continue. So Do you want to kind of just maybe update the Mount Rushmore of AI companies with Claude, which is like Amazon? We have Google, obviously Meta, and all of the big cap tech AI companies right now.
Well, I think there's, in my mind, a big three, and that's Microsoft, Amazon, Google, right? And by the way, when anyone asks me like what sector, like, and I think I've said this before, like what sector to buy, what do I like? I'm just basically like the cloud providers. Like that's the like if you ask me like who's going to be around in 10 years most likely and growing, 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 it's those three stocks. And a big reason is um the larger you get, especially if you have good AI, like the easier it is to just like build those businesses, automate more things. If you already have all this compute, and more people need compute, and you're kind of the vendor of that, those are the companies to bet on, in my estimation. So I think you have those three at the top, and then I kind of think right after that is Meta, just because they have really, they have Llama, they have their open source, open AI model, Llama 3. And Olama is the specific open source one where you can just download the package. And then they have PyTorch, things like that. And I mean, NVIDIA is in that neighborhood too. I would say the only reasons they're right below is because they're not like the cloud providers. They're not like, I would say they're not necessarily, um, you know, as interesting long term because they're not necessarily like owners of all that compute. But I'd say that those are the five, and it's kind of the cloud providers at the top that actually have like. And the reason I say, I put the cloud providers and Gemini, OpenAI, Claude. I've called them different names here based on what they are, but the Gen AI, the conversational, like Meta has one. As well. But I kind of put those in the lead just because, and Google there because we always talk about it kind of having the biggest brain, maybe partnering with Apple, or we say the best AI brain. And if you ever are curious as to dig into that, we always say look up Mu0, which is one of their most advanced companies. Yeah, I think Wolf. I think that's a really like. There's a lot of people who I respect who say like decentralized compute is going to start playing a larger and larger role. I mean, those tend to be crypto people though that say that, and hard to say. It's really hard for me to say whether I would bet on that because on the one hand, I think there's so much growth to be had there, and there's a lot of like I think just the open movement, whether it be open source, shared, like all of that stuff, I think has a big future. But I think where it's hard to understand is the timeline, right? And who really knows how quickly, big corporations are going to get comfortable with the security side of decentralized computing. And I know there's like tons of stuff you can do on that end, but that to me is a little too hard to bet on right now. And I'd rather bet on the, cloud giants because the other thing about it is like if it's a real threat, I bet one of them will acquire like the quote unquote real threat in decentralized computing, or if there's multiple ones, they might build their own, they might acquire it. So I still kind of have the cloud providers, um, as the most interesting things, but it is that is, kind of the existential risk for those companies that are now being really, Amazon's earnings, a lot of it was driven by cloud. So it is interesting. It's gonna be fun to watch, but all of those companies and their AI, with or without the cloud, just really puts them in great positions.
So speaking on AI, I was just thinking about while you're talking, like all the companies you're mentioning are already like the most powerful companies in the world: Microsoft, Amazon, Google. Do you think, because we've talked about SoundHound AI before and like how they were talked about on social media and thrown around, do you think it's possible that a startup AI company or do you think investors should be interested in investing a startup AI company like that versus just investing in Microsoft, Google, Amazon, which are in your eyes the best right now? They have the biggest balance sheets, they have the largest scale, they have the best tech. So like, how could a startup beat them? Would they just acquire anybody who looked like they were going to win? I mean, we've already seen OpenAI. All these companies invested. OpenAI, Anthropic, all the leaders. The big cap has already invested in. So how could they not win in this industry? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that was one of my problems with SoundHound, where it's just like most of these companies, if they have really, really good tech, will get bought up as a private company and they'll never have to, they'll never have to go public. Like, I think a company that raises money by going public is kind of saying that they're going it alone. Maybe you don't have quite the buy-in yet. And obviously Nvidia made an investment in SoundHound, and that was a big thing, but they didn't acquire it. So I think that's like everybody got excited about an Nvidia investment, but like the real vote of confidence would have been acquiring the whole thing. And who knows, maybe that wasn't on the table. Maybe SoundHound didn't want to sell. But I tend to look at it like this: if companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, like if Amazon, Microsoft, whoever is going to, can find a way to make interesting offers to them, I have a hard time believing that they couldn't make an interesting offer to anyone. And, it's not just interesting, right? If you're a company like Anthropic, right, and you just have really cool tech that didn't necessarily have the distribution yet, right? It's not only selling, but getting that windfall of selling, but it's also that um it's also that you get that distribution. And I think that that's like a big thing for Amazon in that acquisition and for anyone. So I think that that's, kind of what I would advise anyone looking at like public AI companies, that it's just like, hey, I think other than like C3 or Palantir that are kind of more service oriented AI companies, there's a reason why, those would be less exciting acquisition targets. But I think anyone that's like got a tech that is trying to get like mass distribution, mass sales, which you can't really say of like consulting companies, I think if they're not being acquired by one of those like large cloud companies, I think that's kind of like a negative signal in terms of like what the scale of that company could be. And I think makes it a very risky investment.
So, spinning to our next topic, we got some updates on the Apple Car story, which I didn't know. So, hopefully, our viewers right now will find interesting also. So, the project that was codenamed Titan, completely scrapped now. Apple in total invested over $10 billion in the project. What's interesting, which I didn't know, is in 2014, the only reason the project was started in the first place is because autonomous driving was in the zeitgeist, and Apple was afraid of losing top talent to Tesla and their engineers. So they kind of threw them a bone to start the project, and that's the only reason it even began in the first place. Another interesting thing is at points throughout the project, they thought about scrapping the car even earlier and just acquiring Tesla, which I don't know if you have any thoughts on how that would have went, George. Um, but do you think this is a wasted $10 billion for Apple, or did they actually learn something throughout this process?
Well, I think it's one of the things that we're talking about. It touches on a few very interesting themes I think we have, which is the first, and we talked about it, is just like, is Apple like, are they really all that good at understanding market needs and their capabilities to build them anymore? Because like they used to be so good, they would invent the needs, they would invent products, and like it's interesting now they're not even like even the idea of the car, they were kind of like ripping off other people. So they were behind other companies, which is like very different than who they are historically. So even that is, I think, a switch. But like beyond that, like, Jobs, Jobs Apple they nailed, pretty much everything. And maybe that was just because he was like bullheaded and wouldn't lose. But I think part of it is that, they did kind of understand the market so well that when they brought a product to market, it was something that, like, not only they marketed brilliantly, but it was something that people were going to use and need and get excited about. And I think that it's just like, yeah, it seems to be like a real departure from their creative design ability, efficiency, um, that they just kind of like missed on this one. Like, I will give them credit. It's important to know when to quit. And if you don't have a good product and you're $10 billion in and you don't see it happening, like, kudos to Tim Cook or whoever made the decision to shut it down. I think that's one of the toughest things you can do as a leader, like put that money in and then not do it. But, the flip side is, that is a lot of money. Compare it to like what happened with Meta, and they made the market nervous, spending $2 additional billion on, on a market line, a product line, where they've already seen a lot of success. Contrasting that with Google, who just is like, Apple, who's like trying this car, and that's kind of like a moonshot for them. So yeah, I think that this kind of shows more than anything. Like, yeah, I agree, Joseph. Um, it kind of shows that they started to get on the other end of this curve where I think they've lost some of their mojo, and they can't just kind of like execute on anything, like have their design team, have them compete. As to the other part of the question with the Tesla, like, yeah, they might have wanted to acquire Tesla, but I'm not really sure that was ever really on the table. I mean, it would have been interesting to see, like, hear like what the backroom deals or whatever were on that. But yeah, I just I don't think that was ever a real possibility.
So speaking of Tesla, we got more news. It's amazing how much news Tesla can put out, but they slashed their supercharger team and they reduced expansion plans. I saw even 4 New York City locations they halted working on. So big cuts in that side of their business. They seemingly want to go all in on AI, self-driving, Tesla Optimus. Um, Seems like Elon finds that side more exciting. But also a quote that I promised I'd share, which George, when I saw this, I was like reading between the lines, and I was like, oh my god, is he saying what he's saying? So the Xpeng boss, which is a Chinese EV company, said he welcomes Tesla's full self-driving China entry with open arms, sees it as driving entire industry forward. And all I heard when I read that quote is, "Oh, he's stealing the tech." Like that's what it means. But
Yeah, yeah,
we'll see.
yeah. This guy's excited to steal this stuff. That's what I like. That's yeah. I mean, who knows? Like I said, it's gonna be like that's gonna be such an interesting thing to watch because like Musk isn't stupid either, and like especially when it comes to like, um, sometimes I think he can put his foot in his mouth a little bit, but this is like if he's going in there, he's got to have some plan to defend it. Um, but the supercharger thing is truly odd. Like, that was one of the things that everyone was like excited about and was going to be like a real value prop. Like, initially I was like, is he selling it to someone? And maybe that might still be in the works. But he's already, like, I read an article today that said he had backed out of 4 leases in New York. And that was kind of like a big problem for a lot of like getting them charged was a big problem for a lot of people. And like, I don't know what his plan is because he's kind of like doubling and tripling down on, FSD, full self-driving. But I'm just like, well, how are those cars going to charge? Right? Okay, like, and I saw something really funny, and this is just like classic, like you might call it new Musk. But I was like reading his conference call, and apparently he said, if you don't believe in like our ability to automate like self-driving cars, you shouldn't own Tesla. Which I'm just like, he's just got like this, like, it's just a very weird. I've never seen a public company's CEO that kind of has this like we don't need you attitude because it's like very much the opposite of what you like what you want to have as a public company CEO, which generally like you're behaving to like not piss off anyone and like make as many people like you as possible. And sometimes that means saying just like being like super uninteresting all the time. That's the that's like the classic CEO archetype. Like uh I like venture like I'm thinking of like any of these like the rest of the Magnificent Seven like like embody that to a T. Like just not trying to be interesting at all. Like it seems like they're in a competition to. Um Jensen Wong is like the only one who's like, the leather jackets. He's trying like, but even then, he's just like spicing things up a little bit. Like, he's not really like, I can't think of anything controversial he's ever said. Like, I think the most controversial stuff he ever says is about like NVIDIA, like, changing the world and being the best or like whatever. Like, but that's pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a public company CEO. So like that's really interesting, but I don't understand. Like I remember when like Ford and GM announced that they were going to use the superchargers, and that was like a great day for Tesla stock. That was still when we were like more bullish on it. But yeah, I think that I don't know what like, and I'll say this, to appease like I don't know that he doesn't have a plan, but it's very hard to discern what his plan is right now. Like it's really puzzling. And like, I don't know. I'm just like, to be clear, this is only speculation, but like the thing that fits the most is that woman who was like running that supercharger department, like not just like pissing him off and them having some kind of personal conflict. Like that's the only thing that makes sense to something that's just like so important, like having more chargers and the superchargers. That's like such a big um that's just like such a big important thing. But I can get to the questions. um that who will be the most successful in the self-driving taxi race? That is a very interesting question. um you know I would say like one thing like very specifically is Musk. One thing I always say about him is that he's maybe his most impressive characteristic is like greasing the wheels of like politics and like getting things done on the legislative side. Like I think most famously, like those that don't know, it's like it was next to impossible to go direct to consumer to sell cars, and Tesla figured it out. They figured out how to get around like the embargo of car dealerships. Um, but what I would say on that in terms of like now he's pretty bifurcated. Obviously, he's aligned himself more with one political party. So I think if that political party wins, I could actually see Tesla like winning or getting self-driving cars on the road very soon, just because of that like political alignment and kind of him bifurcating on that. Um, but I don't think it's necessarily like a winner take all. I think once the legislation is there, um, Google made the first self-driving car. Or, for those that don't know, they won a DARPA challenge, I believe in 2006. Sebastian Thrun was like the main scientist on that, who I actually got to meet one time, who's very nice. Um, and and actually, like one of the funny things he said to me, like one of the things that I really remember is I was talking about automating and having like a small team, and he was at Google, and the one thing he's a man of a few words, or at least in the brief time I met him, and he said, "Yes, small is good," which is kind of funny coming from Google. That might have been something in his experience. Maybe it was too big, but you always like Waymo, Google, like you can't count them out. Um, and then Uber, like just because they're just like they made that slogan or whatever you want to call it, like move fast and break shit. Like Uber as a company, I mean, with their new CEO, maybe they're not going to be as good as that, but I will say they have so much like infrastructure and a good like training set, and they've actually done a lot, you know, of dealings with like the local municipalities that you're really going to need to do. Like, for example, like I could easily see Tesla like rolling out in a few big cities, and then Uber very quickly rolling out after that in a number of smaller cities because they already have those relationships. But I think those are, I would have said, the traditional car company like, GM, but I'm not sure GM is going to be the operator versus the seller, and they have Cruise automation. But Cruise had a pretty like horrible like test experience, and then it kind of exposed some things there. So I think those are the ones, those are the main horses in the race. But I do think depending on who wins the election, like I would call Tesla like a big favorite if if the Republican victory.
Um, so we have 4 minutes left before we have to do the switch over. So I'm gonna go to our last story because I think it's the most entertaining that we have left. So the DOJ has charged a person that they call Bitcoin Jesus with a $48 million tax fraud case. His real name is Roger Ver. He owned 131,000 Bitcoin all the way back in 2014. So he's a very wealthy man, but he didn't claim all of them, and DOJ is coming for tax money. So do you think this is a story we're going to hear more in the future? Them reaching or even going way back in history, 10 years, and trying to claim tax funds from people in the crypto space?
Yeah, I mean, and I think they're gonna they want to make examples of people here. I think it's just like they definitely there's so much like like regulation to be done, and like I think if they get people, especially major examples that they can have, they'll do that. Now, I think what's particularly interesting is like um most of these people, like there's just like so much on the list of crypto people that just like continue to get in trouble with the law. And I think that's obviously like one of the big things that we talk about. And it's just like you got to be, just be very careful with anything in crypto. That's the main thing when I say that's the main part of the story that I think is important. Whether it be on your own taxes, like err on the side of caution. You should talk to someone that's like an expert in crypto, because I think a lot of people are still feeling their way with it. um but yeah, I think that we kind of see how much of the Wild West it is there, time and time again. And I think where it's important to warn people is I think some people see these big returns and say like, oh, that's going to be me, but they don't really understand the like sheer quantity of risk that's taken on when they take crypto. And like, especially the thing that we point out is all the time is that there's non-transparent options markets. So you don't even know where people are betting. And it's very hard to take a position when you don't know if people are like loading up on puts as you take it. And, I was saying that as, crypto is going up and up. And, obviously it did kind of suddenly take a turn. And I'm not saying that I called that turn by any means, but, there were reasons to be concerned. And just a funny end to the story is that in terms of the scamming, is someone reached out to me via the newsletter, responded, and I got one of my funniest emails. First, it was just like sharing screenshots of them saying they were Satoshi and a billionaire, and it was like screenshots of like $35 billion or whatever um, in uh, in my email box, and within like 30 minutes later, this guy was just like, um, I invented AI. I invented AI. Everything you're using is mine. You can thank me for. And I just kind of responded, I'm waiting to hear back from Satoshi. I just kind of responded. I was like, well, what do you want? Like, I was like, what's the point of this? And nothing. Maybe Satoshi is gonna watch this and tell me, but you did have a name on there, so that would be a pretty silly way to reveal his identity. Um, but I do want to get to this question from Sentinel Studio before I move. And I think, my best guess with Amazon is the beat was really driven by cloud. And I don't think, when we talk about like, when we talked about like CVS and Starbucks and some other businesses that have gotten hit really hard, I think that like a lot of the concern was that people are worried about consumer spending, consumer goods. And obviously, like for now, at least, and for the foreseeable future, the consumer goods are, the big part of Amazon's business. So the fact that they a big source of their beat was cloud growth, and you didn't necessarily see the same exciting growth on their consumer goods, I think is probably what is kind of giving apprehension on it. And then the other thing is just like Amazon's expensive. If you look at it relative to the other Magnificent Seven, like it is, the third most expensive company by PE or forward PE after Tesla and Nvidia, and it's pretty close to Nvidia on forward PE, and that's shocking considering that Nvidia is growing at a much faster rate in all of its businesses than Amazon. So I think that you're basically seeing that tightness around worry on consumer goods, and then it just like being kind of expensive. So because it's so expensive, unless it really has like gangbusters earnings, that's what happens.
All right, that's a good place to leave it, and we'll do our switch over now to the model portfolio. Thanks everybody for tuning into the first part. Comment your favorite part so far, but George will see you on the other side. Yeah, George is doing the switch over. Let's get an update on the markets since we've been speaking. Okay, so the Powell pump is reversing. We are back to almost flat on the day for the QQQ. You're welcome, Sentinel, for that answer. The SPY is up about 0.25%, and the Dow Jones is up about 0.2%. But let's take a look at them in Prospero and see what Prospero is seeing too. So the QQQ currently is at 38 net option sentiment, which is it's still higher than it was earlier. So we're seeing a little bit of a rebound in that. And the SPY is at 38 as well. So both indexes are showing the same right now. It's a rare sight. Usually they're a little bit different. Good, I'm shorting. Oh, you don't believe in the Powell pump, Wolf? Yeah, you might be right the way it's looking right now. The QQQ just went negative on the day. So it looks like the market doesn't trust the Powell pump either. We didn't get to one of our stories today. Maybe I'll bring it back up Monday. Comment right now. If you want me to bring this story back Monday, comment. Otherwise, I'm going to drop it and I'll get a whole new list of topics for it. But it was about the cyber attack of UNH. So comment if you're still curious about that, and I'll bring it back up Monday for you guys. If not, we'll just let it be. But without further ado, we are going to be getting into the model portfolio update. Very interesting things happening right now, George. The market's kind of reversing the Powell pump that we saw. Wolf says he's shorting the market. Maybe he's right.
I mean, one of the things, but still curious about what?
I asked the chat if they wanted the cybersecurity. I'm going to bring it back up Monday. So you got to tune back in Monday, sauce pot. But yeah, I'll bring it up for you.
Got it. Yeah, I think that is definitely going to be an interesting. Oh, I forgot. I like that one. I didn't know you cut it. All right. So I'm like very like, especially with these like up and downs, like I was pretty even long short going into today in both the investing and the trading portfolio, and I'm one of those examples of me being very happy that I stayed neutral. It's just like it's a nice little trick that like I've picked up, where it's just like unless I have real strong inclinations on the market, or even like strong ones, I just it's just pretty even like easy to stay neutral. And especially for something like Powell speaking, like it kind of intensifies. All right, so let's see what we're seeing on sectors. Yep.
You know, something I noticed is we were kind of a few weeks ago talking about how the market was seesawing back and forth, but I feel like now it's more like whipsawing back and forth. Like the moves are bigger and they're every day. They're like reversing. If we go up, we go
Yeah.
down, then we go back up.
No, I know. It's just like, and if you just look, it's like everything again today. I mean, utilities. All right. Oh, look at that. Large cap value now looks like, of all the weird, like, yeah, of all the strange things to target, I guess people are happy about growth now. All right, there we go. Want to tell me what's going on with QQQ and SPY and option sentiment?
Yes, when I checked a few minutes ago, they were both identical, but let's see if that's still the case. Nope. Okay, so the SPY is at 33 and the QQQ is at 31. They were both at 38 just a few moments ago, so a little softening.
All right. This is good. Oh. I was like, we're getting to the filter, but no, we're not. What's going on with MCK? No, that's looking good. We're going to hold on. I don't know if I want to hold SRPT. It's going to be a hard decision. I think I might.
They're after hours today, right? Their earnings?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll hold on to CB. It's a good diversification. All right, anything here? Ooh. What is going on with WBX? I don't even know what WBX is. Electronic technology. What happened with you? Oh, I think this is like an EV charging. We're holding it for now. SNA, I think it's time to get out of that. This never really like, yeah, definitely time to get out of that. As actually, I think I'm going to do We don't need to be so loaded up on NVIDIA. Anything else? No, I'm not getting caught up in this. What's going on with cold? Columbia banking system. Yeah, getting out of that. Yeah. Not what I was trying to do. Okay. AIV. Okay. Now we are. I like that answer, Mario. It's just some guy trying to get an edge.
Yeah, he came to the right place then.
Where is? Okay. What did we say? I think we said utilities and materials we wanted to target on the long side. All right, so utilities. Anything else? I didn't see where. No. Where's my mouse? Okay. All right, some of these. Well, is it time to get AMR again? Yep, we're grabbing it. I feel like that's one where we don't always time it that well.
All right, APD. We've taken this one for some rides for sure. Yeah. And then okay. These are our diversification picks. All right, now we got 4 minutes left. We've paced well today. Oops. I'm just deleting some stuff we already have in our portfolio, basically. All right. God, I always do that. Okay. Do we have BEPC in the portfolio already? Oh, good thing we closed this out. We're not touching that. Steven, BEPC? By the way, we're gonna.
Ay. Sometimes the mute button gets me going. I don't see it now.
I'm adding it.
I should mention though that QQQ net option sentiment is down to 16 live, so increased weakening towards the close.
Yeah, well, good thing. I mean, pretty much, I'm gonna update it. I'll update it in the letter, but I was pretty much already. It doesn't really change that much for me. I was already. Damn. So much biotech. Getting back into IRT. Never seen MGA.
Now that I also heard that, though, I'm going to de-risk our tech stuff a little bit. Take one more look. Anything? Just want to de-risk all of this a little bit now that I saw that. What else? All right, I think that's sufficiently de-risked. That still works. All right. We're sending that. And do we have any other questions?
Nope. We just got Wolf commenting up in the chat. Thank you, Wolf. Good to see you in the chat, but nothing else. Have a good rest of the week, everyone. All eyes turn to Apple tomorrow after the market, but we'll be back Monday normal time. We'll see everybody then.
Thanks, guys. And gals.
Bye, everyone.